This is TrineDay's Roundtable number 5. The quest for the Grail is resolved, the oldest spy operation in history. The deep answers are in the mystical. Change is happening. Never give up. Resurrection. Part of the series exposing the failure of empire and reclaiming the narrative creation process, featuring publisher Kris Millegan and husband and wife co-authors Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould. I am Bruce de Torres. I'll be moderating today. These roundtables were inspired by the VALEDICTION, Paul and Liz's 2-book novelized memoir that combines 3 days of the Condor and the film JFK as it unravels the deep state mystery behind the unsolved 1979 assassination of U.S. Ambassador to Afghanistan Adolph Dubs. His death changed the world as much as JFK's, but few even know his name. To set the stage, I want to share something that Paul and Liz wrote about the VALEDICTION. Instead of fulfilling the American dream, the U.S. trapped itself in its own nightmare of endless war. Now, Americans long for a spiritual regeneration towards peace. Over 4 decades, we assimilated an understanding of how to envision moving from war as an honorable sacrifice to peace that serves all. For the first half, Paul and Liz will present what they want us to know. Then Kris will, and then we'll open it up to everyone for questions and comments. And now, Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould.
Thank you so much, Bruce, and thanks everyone for being here. I want to start with a statement that I hope will be fulfilled. By the end of this presentation, we really do hope that you will understand why we can say the Grail quest is resolved and what that will do to the oldest spy operation in history. As we lay out our journey, some aspects will be familiar to you, but bear with us. We have never put all these pieces together in this particular order from beginning through to the end. But before I begin, I want to establish why we chose to write the VALEDICTION 3 Nights of Desmond as a novelized memoir instead of a straight historical retelling of what we experienced. The subject of Afghanistan and our involvement going back to the 1979 Soviet invasion is complicated and nuanced. It involved many people and events that are generally unknown. We believe that by telling our story as we experienced it over 40 years, would develop a level of understanding that a factual dissertation could not. In writing our book this way, we also believe that it would extend the reader's understanding of the unknown, the dark side of the news business, and the secret policies behind it, and inevitably the mystical. Over time, this resulted in our leaving the confines of corporate journalism and venturing into our own narrative creation process. It was a difficult decision to make, but in the end, we realized traveling our own road was the only way to achieve what we'd set out to do, finding the Grail of our own existence. We entered the mystical side of the Afghan adventure in 1987 before we even knew we were on a Grail quest. We were so frustrated with getting nowhere at changing the official narrative, we came to question our own assumptions about journalism and began writing movie scripts. By the end of the 1980s, we had completed 4. But then in September of 1991, our 10-year-old daughter, Alyssa, told us about a strange dream she'd had with Paul's deceased father, accompanied by a man in a Scottish plaid suit with matching hat. The man told Alyssa he was 800 years old. We already knew the Fitzgerald family had been in Ireland for 800 years and decided that we had been given a mystical clue to dig into the family history. 3 months later, we saw Oliver Stone's film JFK and found the inspiration we'd been looking for to further our story. Stone's use of an esoteric secret society with deeper motives behind the killing resonated with us. In our research into the Norman invasion of Ireland in 1169, we discovered historical reasons why members of some secret societies might have wanted to eliminate JFK in the modern era as retribution for past crimes. In the hope that Stone would be interested in this esoteric aspect, we developed a research paper called The Voice to fill out the details and got it to him. But Stone was intrigued, but really wanted our Afghanistan story instead. Once we started working on the Afghan script, a synchronistic connection we could never have imagined emerged when a research book we found contained a photo of a man wearing a Scottish plaid suit and matching turban. The photo was of Alexander Gardner, an American mercenary who'd found his way to Afghanistan in the 1820s, discovered the religion of Zoroaster, married an Afghan princess. He'd not only lived the real life of Rudyard Kipling's Man Who Would Be King, he provided Kipling with essential information for his novel. Alyssa confirmed that day when she came home from school that the soldier in the photo was the man from her dream. As we worked with Stone on the Afghan script, we continued to develop The Voice as a novel, and he asked us to merge elements of it with the work we were doing for him. That effort resulted in a mystical version of the Afghan screenplay called 3 Nights of Desmond, and triggered Stone to ask for an option on The Voice as well. At that time, we decided not to accept Stone's offer and to finish writing The Voice instead. And as we plugged ahead, we chose as the model for our antagonist, the man who had hired us to go to Afghanistan in 1981, CBS Foreign News editor Peter Larkin. The character emerged as a tragic archetype, a wounded veteran determined to twist the American story to get back at the Soviets for what he believed they had done to him in Vietnam. In The Voice, published in 2001, the character of Alyssa, as Paul's daughter, resolved the conflict between the Larkin character and Paul. Even though Alyssa had no involvement in our work, over the decades, many of our Afghan contacts that she had actually never met continued to enter into her life. The most powerful occurred, though, when she came to meet Peter Larkin himself through a friendship with his daughter. We knew nothing about this friendship until December 23rd, 2011, when Peter and his daughter arrived at our home for a party as Alyssa's guests. What we had written in The Voice materialized literally before our eyes for a party as Alyssa's guests. The novelized encounter between Paul and Peter through Alyssa, which had been foreshadowed in The Voice, was delivered to us through our front door. It was a revelatory moment produced by our daughters that completed a journey begun 30 years before between 2 competing storytellers. In 1991, Oliver Stone had put us back on the Afghan course, and in that process crossed us over into the telling of our own story. By weaving us back and forth between the Afghan screenplay and The Voice novel, he connected us to the multidimensional nature of narrative creation. Although our 3 years of work with him never resulted in a film, it was fulfilled with the publication of The VALEDICTION 3 Nights of Desmond in 2021. And now Paul will read a chapter in which the character Desmond Fitzmaurice draws him into Afghanistan's mystical vortex.
The United States is a Templar creation, kept alive through Freemasonry, Fitzmaurice said. MI6 has always used Masonic lodges to recruit their agents. November 22nd is the Masonic Day of Revenge for Jacques de Molay. Dealey Plaza is a Masonic shrine named for 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason, Knight Templar, Shriner, and member of the Red Cross of Constantine, George B. Dealey. Need more evidence? Desmond turned toward the dark sky illuminated by the bursting shell fire. What you're looking at is the Templars' Old Testament project. Purify the material world of everything in it through war. The war against matter, the White Knights' War, the Puritan War. The idea struck me like a blast of stale cold air from a crypt. Puritans. This was where I'd cross Theodore Eliot, the Puritan white knight riding to the rescue of a fallen world. He hadn't taken me on that night at the Parker House for what I did. He'd taken me on for who I was in some past life as an Irish Catholic who didn't know his place in God's order. By going to Afghanistan, I'd entered his Manichaean war of light against the dark. And if Theodore Eliot and Richard Pipes and the Team B had convinced themselves that they were the White Knights by destroying a material world corrupted by Rome, that made me the Black Knight for trying to save it. The war against matter was old, at least as old as Afghanistan's Indus Valley civilization. It went by many names: Manichaean, Gnostic, dualist, heretical, Cathar, or just plain good and evil. All I could think of was Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Oppenheimer and his I am become death from the Bhagavad Gita. The Puritans hit a home run for antimatter that day. Oppenheimer had showed the world what a Gnostic future looked like. They call this place the graveyard of empires, Desmond Fitzmaurice said to me, now exuding the presence of a ghost. But this war will make Afghanistan the graveyard of graveyards, because it's all going to end here. Imperialism itself will end here. So is this where the war of light against dark ends, I asked, the return to where it began, the place Fyodorov considered the Garden of Eden? If you look hard enough here, you'll find your own connection to the past. He replied, knighthoods continue to exist. The Templars see themselves as the White Knights protecting the Grail, and the Black Knights as their enemies. Royal bloodlines still battle for influence in the game. Publicly, they run corporations, they direct armies, make foreign policies. Unseen in the background, they adhere to a calling that came before. I struggled with the idea. Am I one of those? Fitzmaurice snorted a laugh. Everyone who comes here has been called. You think it's about the narrative. It is, but the narrative was written down in the Old Testament long ago, and you can't change it. Don't be so sure, I said in a fit of hubris. I brought backup this time. He's arriving by plane tomorrow along with my wife and crew. We'll see how that old Puritan Theodore Eliot deals with that. Fitzmaurice smiled coldly. And how do you think the CIA will react to your rewriting their dream of fulfilling Old Testament prophecy? Fitzmaurice's comment almost knocked the wind out of me. The CIA, I said, absorbing for the first time who exactly I was up against. Can there be such a thing as Central Intelligence? The insiders call it Mother, he said coldly. How very Gnostic, I responded. Fitzmaurice looked at me thoughtfully and sighed as the light show rumbled on over the horizon. You will learn before long that the White Knight's obsession with Mother has made them mad, he said, sighing deeply. They are locked into their dualism. By fulfilling the prophecies they actually believe, they are hastening the arrival of the Redeemer, the dad who'll come down off the mountain and straighten it all out. And who's the dad? I asked. Yahweh, of course. Yahweh will restore the King of Jerusalem to his rightful throne and rule the final empire, when all the nations will pay tribute to the house of the God of Jacob. For the nation and the kingdom that will not serve you will perish, and the nations will be utterly destroyed, Fitzmaurice muttered pensively as the rumble of the guns grew closer. But they've forgotten that in reality, the father and the mother must come together in their son to escape their dualism. For without the Son incarnating, there can be no Trinity, and without the Trinity, there can be no resurrection. Fitzmaurice turned back one more time to the chaos over the ridge, and that is the narrative you must be prepared to deliver.
So what is all this Grail business about anyway? The legend of the Holy Grail has ancient roots going back thousands of years and has changed dramatically over the millennia. It is described as having a wide range of spiritual and magical attributes, or being the ultimate object of achievement or desire. While it is generally believed that the Grail is a mythical object, some believe that it exists and can be found. The Grail concept, as it is known today, did not exist until 1182, when the French poet Bruce de Torres combined ancient Irish myths and characters surrounding the Arthurian legends and transformed them into Percival and the Holy Grail. It was a literary creation that suited the Norman monarchs ruling Britain and France, and of the politics of the era. Since then, many variations on the theme have been written. Starting in the early 13th century, the German poet and composer Wolfram von Essenbach took Troyes' unfinished Percival and the Holy Grail and created a poem, 25,000 lines, titled Parzival. And Parzival introduced the theme of the Holy Grail into German literature, and it is still considered one of the most profound literary works of the Middle Ages. Many historians believe that the Grail story originated in Celtic Ireland, but there is historical evidence that proves its lineage precedes the arrival of the Celts. And that is the history we are incorporating in the Valediction Resurrection. And now Paul will read a chapter about the background surrounding the Grail legend's ancient Irish roots.
Dublin Airport. July 8th, 1997, 8:15 a.m. Is this the way you remember it? Liz asked as we made our way through the crowd to the rental car desk. No, it was 2 o'clock in the morning. The place was deserted and I was alone. Actually, I never even went into the terminal. The couple next to me offered me a ride to Hope, where my friends were staying, and we just walked to their car. That was thoughtful, Liz said. No, that was Irish. That's the way it was back then. We'll see what it's like now. You're an hour late and we had to let it go, the woman at the rental desk said as we checked in. The words hit like a brick. The plane was late. We had to get our bags. We have 2 children and 2 seniors, Liz pleaded as the shock of losing our vehicle sank in. Your reservation was for 7:30. We held it for 15 minutes, but I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I always found it amazing how unanticipated crises could emerge out of nowhere and threaten to destroy the most carefully laid travel plans. A broken lifter in the old '59 Chevy, a flat tire in the Ford. The problem at hand was no less catastrophic. So I popped the question, what else have you got? The woman bit her lip, then stared into her computer screen. The only other van we have is in the shop. It won't be available until Wednesday. What's wrong with it? I asked. It was scratched and has to be painted. Is it drivable? Oh, yes. It's just the appearance, she said authoritatively. I don't care what it looks like, I said. We'll take it, breathing a sigh of relief. Within minutes, we were loading our bags onto the shuttle bus outside the terminal when the young driver posed a friendly question. Who's the Fitzgerald? He asked, scanning our motley crew. We are, my son Devin responded. Well, so am I, he said, laughing. Of all places, meeting another Fitzgerald. Where are you from? I asked. Oh, it's a little village down past Limerick. I'm sure you've never heard of it. It's called Abbeyfield. We hadn't been off the plane for an hour, and the first ghost had already struck. That's my grandfather's village, I told him. We're from the same place, the same country, same village, same name. How long are you here for? He asked. 2 weeks. We have a wedding up in RD, then down to Abbeyfield for the rest of the stay. Well, whatever you do when you're in Ireland, there's one place you must go. It's called Newgrange, Bruna Boyne in Irish, Angus's palace on the River Boyne. I'd take you there myself, but I've got to work. It's only 20-minute drive from RD, and it's the most amazing thing you will ever see anywhere. This is clearly not the same place I came to in 1971, I said to Liz. The last time I was here, I had to get Dick Reed to drive me to Abbeyfield. This time, the little people from Abbeyfield sent someone out to meet me at the airport. The funny thing is, Liz said, following up, the place is already acting as if it knows you're here and what you've come for. Is that possible? Of course it is, Alyssa said. It's the secret commonwealth you told me about, Dad, remember? And what's the secret commonwealth? Liz asked. It's a famous study of the other world written by a Scottish cleric and natural scientist named Robert Kirk. It's sort of an earlier version of Evan Wentz's fairy faith in Celtic countries, but more first person. What do you mean by first person? Kirk was kidnapped and brought to the other side by the unseelie court, Alyssa said gleefully. Some people think he never really died at all and that he can come and go as he pleases, like an ambassador from the secret state. And we just got our invitation from the secret state, Liz said. And he told us to go to Newgrange, I added. Liz smiled. You are serious. It's the secret power of the Commonwealth, the location, this location. Kirk wrote about it. The powers of the secret Commonwealth reside only in the native inhabitants and their mythological figures. They can't be passed down to colonizers or their children. So you're being treated as a native inhabitant. It's in your DNA, Liz added. And the location knows the sequence. I took the greeting at the airport as a sign. I was on some kind of track. I've been getting signals all my life that I was being directed towards some larger purpose. But what was I supposed to do about it now? Driving up to RD gave me time to adjust to the location. As a young man, I'd driven from Paris to Istanbul and back, but there was something personal about driving through Ireland. Did you catch the name of these places? I asked Liz. They're all out of those Norman books, Strongbow's Conquest and the Twilight Lords we read. Viking settlements, Norman settlements, Flemish settlements. They're actually driving through the Irish Pale. What's the Pale? Devon asked. The only land in Ireland the Irish king was allowed to own. By 1450, it had been reduced to the coastal area just south of Dublin to Dundalk up ahead. And who owned the rest? The great earls owned it, the O'Neills, the O'Connors, the O'Briens, and the Desmond Fitzgeralds. Our family owned Ireland, Devon asked. A big piece of it. As big as the king's piece? 3 times bigger. And the king didn't like that at all, but there was nothing he could do about it. Until Queen Elizabeth came along, Liz said, chiming in. There was a war, a big war against the Desmond Fitzgeralds. And what happened? Devon asked, growing wary. They lost everything, I said. Devon slumped back in his seat and stared glumly out the window. Oh, they were just farmers fighting over farmland anyway, my mother said, butting in. There's nothing down south but farmland. The educated Irish were in the north where they had factories and made things, and that's where the Markies came from. And so my mother went on for another 30 miles with a story I'd heard 1,000 times before. And so I wondered about this place called Newgrange. What was so important about it? And that was where my new understanding of Ireland really began. Ardee was a medieval town of around 3,500 people, 50 miles north of Dublin. And that was all that was left was the old walls of the old walled city was the 15th century castle in the center of town. But that was all I needed to mark the way. Ardee's castle was a landmark and just a block from our appointed destination at Callahan's Butcher's. It's so wonderful you could come all this way to visit. You must be Paul, said the lovely lady waiting for us at the front door of the shop. Did you have any trouble with the roads? No, your directions were perfect, and here we are, I said, introducing our passengers, one by one, until my mother poked her head through the sliding door, and this is Teresa. Rosemary Callahan had been corresponding with my mother over family history for years. By the time we pulled up in front of her storefront, my mother had probably revealed more about us than we knew about ourselves. Callahan's butcher shop was a thriving local institution that had been handed down from father to son for nearly 100 years. Rosemary was everything I expected an Irish host to be. And when the opportunity presented itself, I told her about our strange encounter at the airport. So his name was Fitzgerald, and he was actually from your grandfather's town, she said. And you didn't know him? No, and he told us to go to Newgrange. Do you know the place? I've heard about it, but never been there. They say it's over 5,000 years old. That makes it older than the pyramids, I said. I know, they made a big fuss over it when they began the excavation. That must be why, she said, thinking to herself. I'll call the bookshop next door. Within minutes, Alyssa was lording over a newly collected pile of books and perusing a copy of Newgrange Archaeology and Art and Legend, written by the husband and wife team who'd done the excavation. Dad, we have to go there, she said, sweeping through the pages. It's a Neolithic passage grave. What does that mean? Liz asked. 2300 BC. It means it was a place to commune with the dead. It says the brew was obviously regarded by various storytellers not merely as a burial place or a mausoleum, but as an abode into which people could enter and emerge at will. What's so special about that? Devon asked. It is usually made clear, however, Alyssa read on, that they are of a supernatural order and that the abode or house is not a conventional one. May I see that? Liz asked. In mythological or supernatural contexts, the brew was associated with the Dagda, the good god, his wife Bwan, and his son Angus, all belonging to the Tuatha Dé. People said to have inhabited Ireland before the coming of the Celts, and who thereafter retreated into the fairy mounds and the forts of Ireland. They were not gods in the sense of deities to be revered, but were regarded as supernatural beings who could and did perform deeds beyond the power of mortals. So they were immortal, Liz said, handing the book back to Alyssa. I'm sure it sure looks that way, Alyssa said. It says there are 2 main reasons for why it was built, as the abode of the mythological or supernatural beings known as the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu, and as the burial place of the pagan kings of Tara. And what's the other book you came across? It's a book written by Joseph Campbell called The Masks of God. The lady at the bookstore said it had a lot about Newgrange in it. By various schools of modern scholarship, she read, the Grail has been identified with the Dagda's cauldron of plenty, the begging bowl of the Buddha, in which 4 bowls from 4 quarters were united, the Kaaba of the great mosque of Mecca, and the ultimate talismanic symbol of some sort of Gnostic Manichaean rite of spiritual initiation practiced possibly by the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar, Liz repeated. And what if the Gnostic Manichaean rites of initiation are the Mithraic initiation rituals, she asked. Now that would be a connection. The Templars and their leader, Jacques de Molay, were burned at the stake as heretics, I said. And the 30th degree of Masonry is revenge for his murder, and the Masonic Day of Revenge is November 22nd, Liz said. And there we are, back where we started with JFK, I finished off. So the Templars, JFK, the Masons, and probably dozens of secret societies are all in competition for this thing called the Grail, the cauldron from which no company ever went unthankful, whose contents both restored the dead and produced poetic inspiration, Liz read, quoting from the Campbell book. And we found the source of it right here at a place called Newgrange, thanks to another Fitzgerald from Abbeyfield, a lady from RD, and my mother, Teresa. I said, God certainly does work in mysterious ways. Liz?
And how were we to take these mystical aspects of the JFK assassination narrative and bring them to a satisfying resolution as a part of our quest? That became our challenge. Since 1963, the analysis of the JFK assassination hasn't moved far. Despite a staggering wealth of information provided by researchers, the mainstream arguments are still confined to lone gunmen, conspiracy theories, Cuban Americans, the mafia, the CIA, and/or the military-industrial complex, all of whom had motives for wanting JFK dead. Even as JFK's presidential campaign began in 1960, it was obvious that religious attacks on him were beyond politics as usual. Political cabals in the US were already opposed to a Catholic becoming a president long before JFK, and especially in South Texas. The election was the final straw for those who believed America was a Masonic state created for those fleeing Rome's persecution of a medieval knighthood known as the Knights of the Temple of King Solomon, the Templars. How did it happen? On October 13, 1307, the French King Philip IV, who was in debt to the Templars for financing his wars, ordered them arrested and charged with heretical practices. Then on November 22nd, under pressure from King Philip, Pope Clement V issued the papal bull instructing all monarchs of Europe to seize their assets. When the last Templar Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake by the Pope's inquisitors in 1314, it would serve as an inspiration to generations of heretics dedicated to overthrowing the papacy. In 2016, we published an article stating it was time to stop the revenge and retribution cycle triggered by the suppression of the Templars that justified the killing of JFK, and received this statement from a self-described heretic, quote, "This country was created by Freemasons to escape the killing machinery of the Roman Catholic Church. The USA was created as a safe haven to launch a counter war on the church, hence separation of church and state. And yes, JFK, a Catholic, was taken out because of a history beyond his control. What would allow a Catholic, who would allow a Catholic to run a Masonic refuge? So no, we will not forget, and we do not forgive an evil institutional empire of conquest and profit and power. It is our work to bring it to a halt. Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name give the glory." End of quote. The official narrative of the JFK murder has remained static for too long. 60 years of delays and lame excuses have rendered it mute. The time has come to dig deeper into the JFK murder, and in our book, The VALEDICTION Resurrection suggests the place to begin is with JFK's ancestors. The Fitzgerald dynasty began in 1097 with the marriage of Gerald of Windsor to Nest, daughter of Right Bap Tudor, King of South Wales. The marriage was arranged under the auspices of King William Rufus, the son of William the Conqueror. As a Tudor princess, Nest's lineage traced back to the mythological Celtic court of Arthur, forming the basis of the Grail legends associated with the presidency of JFK. On November 2nd, 1100, in the New Forest, King William Rufus was slain by an arrow shot by Walter Tyrrell, a very close friend of Rufus. Although everyone knew who'd shot the arrow, Tyrrell was never held accountable. It is suspected by many that Rufus knowingly accepted his fate and became the sacred sacrifice required by the ancient rules of kingship. Britain's new Norman aristocracy wanted to prove its legitimacy to the people, and the way to get it was by combining both the political and mystical power of the Grail narrative with sacred killing. Our premise is that, like William Rufus, JFK's murder also fits a pattern of sacred sacrifice. He was shot in Dealey Plaza at a Masonic triangle and suffered the Celtic triple death, strangled by a shot through the throat, shot in the back, and virtually decapitated with the third shot. Researchers claim his brain is missing. Whoever killed JFK on November 22nd, the Masonic Day of Revenge for the destruction of the Knights Templar, was allowed to escape. But even more telling is that, like Rufus, JFK's actions prior to November 22nd seemed to indicate that he understood his fate and that he too had accepted the role of sacred sacrifice. Did JFK's assassination complete a Grail cycle that William Rufus inaugurated with the marriage of Gerald and Nest and the creation of the Fitzgerald dynasty in 1097? In doing our research for the Valediction Resurrection, we came upon a copy of John Hooker's 1586 publication of Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. This document proved to be a revelation in terms of our thesis, and Paul will read some of it from the Valediction to give you an idea of the nature of the relationship between the Fitzgerald family of Desmond and the royal family in London that was fulfilled by the murder of JFK.
Hooker's translation was dedicated to Sir Walter Raleigh, Knight, Liz said, reading down the page. It's a 400-year history of Ireland from Henry II through Queen Elizabeth I. 1586, that's just after the Desmond Wars, I said. That's for sure. And boy, does he not like your branch of the family. I scanned the pages and read it out loud. Quote, I began to consider the two great and wonderful works of God, both his severe judgment against traitors, rebels, and the disobedient, and of his mercy and loving kindness upon the obedient and the dutiful. Uh-oh, I said, fearing what was coming. But of all others, none to be compared to this tragical discourse of Ireland and the most unnatural wars of the Desmonds against her sacred majesty. It gets better, Liz said as she pointed to a paragraph toward the end of the page. Quote, whose disobedience the Lord hath in justice so severely punished and revenged, as the like hath not in our age been seen nor known. This thing is even creepier than I expected, I said, contemplating the rabbit hole we'd just gone down. Can I see that? I asked, taking the book in hand. Quote, the Earl of Desmond, named Gerald Fitzgerald, was descended of a younger house of the Geraldines of Kildare, and both of them descended from one and the same ancestor, Gerald of Windsor, a noble gentleman of Normandy, who after his arrival into England traveled into Wales and there married the Lady Nesta, daughter to the great Rosines, Prince of South Wales, and by others had issue Maurice Fitzgerald, ancestor of the aforesaid Geraldines, and for their truth and fidelity were advanced to honor. Liz was shocked. Hooker certainly making it clear the Fitzgeralds were originally revered by the royals, she said, shaking her head. They must have really crossed a red line. Oh, did they ever, I said, continuing on. Quote, and in the beginning of King Edward III's reign in the year 1327, Maurice Fitzthomas, the younger brother of that house, was created Earl of Desmond. And from thence, as before, they continued as faithful subjects for the course of sundry hundreds of years until this brain-sick and breakdance Gerald of Desmond and his brethren, allies, and complices, forgetting the honor of his house and forsaking their faith, did break into treasons and showed themselves open enemies, traitors, and rebels, using all manner of hostilities and outrages to the impeach of her most sacred majesty and the destruction of the Commonwealth. Oh, wait a minute, Liz said. Hooker is saying they had no problem with the Fitzgerald family until the last Earl of Desmond came along? That doesn't figure. Gerald of Wales was concerned about the Fitzgerald's relations to the royal family back in the 12th century. You're looking at Elizabethan claptrap, I said, or better yet, how you justify a genocide against one of your own. And this is the payoff right here. Quote, the price whereof in the end he paid with his and their own bloods to the utter destruction of themselves and that whole family. For first the Earl himself, the chief of his family, after his long repast and his traitorous follies, was driven in the end to all extremities and penuries, and at the last taken in an old cottage, and his head was cut off and sent to London, and there set upon London Bridge, and his lands and inheritance confiscated and discontinued from his house and name forever. A notable and rare example of God's just judgment and severe punishment upon all such as do resist and rebel against the higher powers of his anointed. And the Lord shall root him from out of the face of the earth that shall blaspheme his gods and curseth the prince of the people. End of quote. I think your take on Theodore Eliot was right on the money, Liz said, grimacing. His attack on you was about being one of those Fitzgeralds, as if you were the ghost of JFK. I understand it now. Dreams. Dreams have been a very important part of our creative process from the very beginning. I dreamed a dream recently that I'd like to share with you to end this little part of our discussion today. Okay, did I tell him? Okay. On the morning of January 8th, 2022, I woke up from a dream where I felt I had completed my experience going through this whole process. I found myself surrounded by a golden glow in a snowy forest that felt extremely peaceful. Liz and I were actually in the tree and beaming at each other. It was some kind of golden stone-shaped object that was in the tree with us. And as soon as I woke up, I told Liz, I spent the night with the Grail. Since our grandchildren weren't able to come to our home this year for Christmas, for the first time in 70 years, we didn't do a Christmas tree. We didn't put up a Christmas tree. We celebrated Christmas, but we didn't put a tree up. So I felt that what had happened was I kind of transferred the energy of those 70 years to that dream. And in that dream, I saw the fulfillment of what those 70 years really meant, from the time I'd grown up as a little kid, the time my children were small, until these very terrible days that we're living through right now. And I expressed itself in a dream. So I'd like to share that with you. That is my way in which I'm bringing my own experience with the Grail, what it means to me. We have gone back, the Valediction Book 2, Resurrection will go through the course of my experience and my understanding with Liz of what we experienced in Ireland, the background of the Fitzgerald family, and how we feel that is going to work its way into the future. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Kris.
Well, you know, is there any reason why I wanted to publish their work? You know, I mean, goodness gracious me, you know, I've been talking about how the Kennedy assassination was a mystical kill for as long as I can remember. And, you know, America is the repository and also is the end of a dream of a lot of people, of being able to, you know, govern yourself instead of having somebody up here say, well, you got to do this and you got to do that because your daddy was this and blah, 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 blah. Well, you know, the secret societies too, they brought us in. They took America out from being a republic into being empire. They did this through false flag and you know, lying to us and whatnot. Basically, there was a big discussion at the end of the 1800s about America's empire, and it happened to do with the Spanish-American War. And at the root of the Spanish-American War was the drug trade by these secret societies, which gives them this big pile of money, which allows them to, sit in the shadows and influence and manipulate our history and ourselves. And so they took us into empire. And that's really not what America's about. America's not about empire, so these secret societies had a real strong run, okay, in our government, in our executive branch, and in our intelligence, and using the assets of America and the American people for their own designs. And the Bible's an interesting thing. I mean, he was talking about dreams. I mean, do they talk about dreams in the Bible? I mean, they are very, important for, Daniel describing the dreams for the king and blah, blah, blah. And then you have Joseph's dreams. And then you have this idea of sacrifice of, you got to kill somebody to make something happen down here. Now, Lord have mercy. That's really kind of counterproductive. That's just falderall that people are using to control us. I mean, like I mentioned the other day, we had a little discussion. I mean, what's the basic ritual of the Bible today, of the Christian church? It's basically let's share some bread and wine together, at a table, and talk about things, instead of this pyramid down type of control. And so, it's not like this discussion hasn't happened before. I mean, when you look at the founding fathers, okay, and they went through years of literal hell and trying to work with all these different people that were here in the United States. And and we're finally here in 2000, we're finally dealing with slavery. Okay. And I mean, and it just wasn't black people. There was other people that were brought in here for slavery, but the whole idea that, well, let me see, I own you and I can make you do what you want. I mean, isn't that rather antiquated?
Yeah.
to say the least. So when Paul and Liz brought me this book, I looked at it and I says, yeah, this is a book around which change can happen, because again, change is happening, and it's not just us. I mean, it's very nice to go out there on Facebook and other places and see that other people are talking about the end of empire and a revitalize of our republic, and an understanding of where we are and what we can do. And I know I just people been upset at me because I haven't just got all upset about COVID and everything, and it's because I really see that as a distraction, okay, to keep us all wrapped up in this thing, when really the problem we have is the corruption in our government, okay, way beyond all of this other stuff. We've got to deal with the direct corruption of our government. And the other part about apocalyptic thinking and different things, you have the dualism. The other thing you have is that people think that things are going to happen immediately. Okay, change is going to happen and we're all going to be happy because now, but then, everybody has their own ideas. And so how is just one kind of change going to make everybody happy? I mean, again, it comes down to the table, sitting around talking about our problems and saying, okay, what can we do to correct it? And myself, I don't like war to correct things. I think, you know, a republic and voting and talking about things and working things out through the political process is the proper way to deal with your neighbors and your brothers and sisters, because that's what government is. Government is dealing with our neighbors, with our brothers and sisters. So Paul and Liz, wow, you know, you really are showing the paucity of today's rhetoric and the future that we can have. We can have a much better future. There's no reason for all the baloney that happens.
Thank you, Kris.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful compliment. Thank you.
At this time, everyone, all the audience can unmute yourselves as long as you don't have background noise, and you know, raise your hand or start asking a question. Let me recognize you, and I'll try. It won't get too chaotic. You know, there's not a mob here, but please, you know, I love to ask this question. Not who's got a question. Yeah, that's the not who's got a question, but who's got the first question.
Who's on first?
Who's on first? That's a great question too. You know, if it helps, I'll just say how Kris has published over 120 books over the last 20 years. Books that the corporate controlled mainstream media powers that be won't touch. And if you're not familiar with his site, TrineDay.com, where you can get Paul and Liz's book, this kind of rich history is really, really, really well documented, like I say, in over 120 books. So now I'm going to challenge our audience. There, you've been challenged to tell us what you feel about all you've heard, or ask what occurs to you. Carol, please.
Well, I've actually known Paul and Liz for a long time, as well as Kris. In fact, I think I sort of gradually introduced you two together in different ways over different decades.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so I'm very familiar with Paul and Liz's story, which, you know, is incredibly moving. And Liz and I are good friends. And I just had an experience on Martin Luther King Day in Sacramento. There was a rally and it was called Solidarity and Solutions. And there were some amazing speakers. And they suggested that we revisit Martin Luther King's letters from a Birmingham jail. But I read those letters and I listened to the speakers, and it was very transformative. But there was a theme, and I think you captured the kernel of it here, and that it has also been carried on through Martin Luther King and is like absolutely critical at the current moment, of recognizing the deeper truths about who I am, where I'm going, what is happening right now. And Liz, you suggested that I listen to a sermon by a local priest, and I listened to it, and he was of the Celtic tradition. His father was a Druid, and he was saying the same thing too. And I can't help feeling that, you know, that is precisely where we are now. And I was so glad that Kris mentioned, you know, he saw the corruption in government. We know that our government is incredibly corrupt. I think a lot of us feel that it's not just our government, it's happening globally. And they have been, especially with the assistance of the CIA, they have woven a narrative which is utterly indefensible and incredibly oppressive. And we were evoking Martin Luther King, especially because of the segregation issue, the dehumanizing of an entire race in this country who worked so hard to create this country, and we're experiencing the same sort of insane segregation today, where so many of the population are being completely dehumanized. And I sort of rejoiced today to discover that the mandates, all of them, have been lifted today in Britain, of all places. So there is this extraordinary change going on. And I think it's the time for everyone to speak their truths. And there's an amazing event coming up, and Liz has been bugging me to talk to RFK Jr. and share this incredibly important piece of history. And I've been really shy about doing it because he's been so much in the foreground right now, trying to push the revelations, which will also help shift the planet. And he'll be in Washington, D.C. This Sunday at the first really enormous worldwide rally for freedom taking place in the United States. They've been happening all over the world, but it's finally at home in the National Mall, and there'll be just a massive act of civil disobedience. So we're at such an extraordinary time. I think your timing is great, Kris. I'm glad you decided to publish the book, and I promise I'll try harder to get it to RFK after. Well,
by the way, Carol, I wanted to let everyone know what my idea was for Carol. I feel that we want to get RFK on the same page we're on about allowing JFK to be viewed as the final sacrifice of that level. Okay, I mean, many people have been slaughtered, and most of them are unknown. I mean, that's the whole point, that we're dealing with massive, annihilation, through all kinds of circumstances. But in trying to invoke, this realization that the only way we can really move forward is to end the revenge and retribution cycle. There's going to be a lot of unfinished business, but if it's based on revenge and retribution, it will never end, and it will just, this insanity will keep on going. So that's what we suggested to Carol, that RFK needs some other way of bringing his power to the people, and this would be such a stunner. And let's get a dialogue. I mean, maybe
it's huge.
It'll just cause a dialogue.
It's as huge as whatever pressure the exposure of the pedophiles in high places might be hand in glove with what it might just is crumbling a little bit in the UK about ending the mandates. The event Carol's talking about on January 23rd is called Defeat the Mandates. And I think defeatthemandates.com is where people can get information about that. It's a gathering in Washington, D.C., and I think it's in other cities around the country. Because of the leverage of the deep history of what the JFK assassination was. Good God, y'all, as they say in the South. Who's got the next question, comment, compliment?
I want to, Carol Brule, she did one of the first 9/11 conferences there in San Francisco, and has been a mainstay of 9/11 truth in California. And the blood feud is, people have been talking about the blood feud and trying to stop that for a long time. And again, you look at the slavery and you look at the history of our founding fathers, and they tried to stop it then. Okay, I mean, part of the problem that was going on at that point in time was they didn't have enough workers, and the British were forcing slaves onto states in the colonies that didn't want to take them. And then you had the negotiations for the Constitution. And I mean, they really did try to get rid of slavery at that time, but it was it wasn't allowed. And so, you know, the dynamics of perfecting our union are, you know, are continuing, and that's what we need to do, is continue to perfect the union. Now,
and the people,
I'm going to say, you know, no, I won't. Go ahead.
well, no, just this union can be improved and perfected if each and every generation is challenged and knowledgeable and convinced that the need for all individuals to step up and do something to protect humanity's right to self-govern right where you are. So that's the value, the inestimable value, Kris Millegan, of your work for the last 20 years. Who's got the next comment or question, please? Oh, Ruth, you must unmute yourself.
Yeah, wow. It's so exciting to hear the story, the telling, and how rich it is, and how engaged I am in it. And I'm just grateful. But I have these thoughts in my head I want to share, and it has to do with othering, and how it is the use of othering and revenge and retribution is one of the most profound ways of othering. And othering is a mechanism that uses making the other the object of your hatred, of what it is that you don't like, or what you want to get rid of. And I feel like this has been so used for so many millennia as a way of having people disconnect from their own center, their own direct relationship with what is divine inside of them, and feeling that the only way that they can resolve a problem is by an act of violence against someone else, something else. And this manipulation has been how wars have been created, how slavery has happened, how all this is. And what I notice is that, first of all, I feel like most of the sacrifices of great people have been people who have come to understand this othering, and have understood the power of helping people come to the heart space of in which they really take responsibility for their actions, and they refuse to blame what's outside of them, and they find a way to create realities. And what I wanted to say is that this way that you are talking about creating the narrative and telling the story, I feel it's about that returning to the self, to the origin of the story, and taking responsibility for the story that is being told. And this is a huge transformation of our mental, the way we structure thought. It's huge, and it's about rewiring the manipulation of fear, and being able to come to love, which allows the creative process to be reinforced. And so when you really understand the creative process, then you understand that you can create something else. And I feel like what you're doing is that turning right at that point where fear and love allow for this creative storytelling to be given the platform. Finally, that's what I want to say.
One of the cures to othering is called turn the other cheek.
Say again.
Turn the other cheek.
That's the way to deal with it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I have a thing about turn the other cheek, that perhaps if you turn the other cheek and you look out of the other side of your face, that you can see from the perspective of the person that you are looking at. It's as if, you can look out of your eyes and see them, but if you turn the other cheek, then you can see their point of view.
It also shows them something too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Bruce is trying to talk and we can't hear him. Bruce, you're silent. No.
No,
Bruce, we can't hear you.
can't hear you.
Bruce, we can't hear you.
Oh, golly. Maybe that's a good thing. My mic was muted. No. Thank you for pointing that out. Ruth, as you were describing the harm of othering and how powers that be, authority, can manipulate us by demonizing groups of others that we can get mad at and put our energies into attacking, it occurred to me, another cure, Kris, is also to ask oneself, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I think what I think? Which can lead someone to questioning authority, because human nature, we want to fit in, we want to be good, we want to be like everybody else. That's just survival from infancy on. Boom. That's a huge habit, an impulse to understand in oneself, why do I do everything my government says? Why do I join the military and kill the people that my government says I should kill? It's because I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to do the right thing. But you look at the carnage around us and through history, we've got to ask ourselves, why do I think what I think? Which leads to this: politically and effectively and tangibly, we must not only question ourselves, why do I think what I think? We must question authority, especially when someone like Kris Millegan has published over 120 books in the last 20 years at TrineDay.com, showing how badly authority has lied to demonize others, to exploit us, and suck so much wealth up to the 1% of the 1%. This conversation, Paul and Liz's books, all of Kris's books, why aren't they on the mainstream? Why isn't this on C-SPAN? Why isn't this on Meet the Press? It's because that's what we're up against. And the solution is owning our own sovereignty, teaching ourselves history. If we rely on anyone but ourselves to find and be curious about what do I need to know to comprehend what's going on in the world, let alone my own heart and emotions, let alone the way I feel about other people. It's all about know thyself. Why do I think what I think? And question authority. Who's got the next comment or question, please?
I'll say
I
something.
see Ruth, Liz's hand. Go.
I know. No, I wanted to just make one point. I think this is a very real part of the problem for so many people. They've mastered control of the economy, and that underlying so many people's unwillingness to do the right thing is because in their mind, giving up their personal economy to do the right thing means they're going to be hurting their family, their ability to do, so you've got a lot of, I think that's something we all have to, factor in,
To keep your job, to keep your job. Yeah.
Well, but that decision has to be made from within each person. But that means that there are a lot of people, if they don't have any kind of help outside of themselves, what are they going to do? Become a homeless person? That's an awful lot to ask of anybody, to do the right thing sometimes. But yet you can see right now what's happening, is people are literally being pushed to that limit. So we've got to really redefine what heroism is. I mean, for some people, leaving that job is very different than for other people, even if they're, we remember this would have been, I think, in the 1980s when the nuclear freeze was going on, and there was a port up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and there was a big deal because all the workers up there were getting cancer from the radioactivity, okay? And many of these workers said, I need the job. So it isn't always that they're, they can be damaging themselves to keep the job. So we've got to get that clear thinking. Nobody can be judged, okay, just like that, because you're not doing, quote, the right thing.
Liz, the whole time you were talking, I was thinking of telling you this, and now I really have to, because you just concluded with getting to clear thinking. And there's a guy on a YouTube channel. His name is James French, and his YouTube channel is James French, and he only has a couple dozen, maybe a dozen videos up there. And he teaches the trust technique, how to get your animal to trust you, your dog, your horse. And his whole message, and I'm hypnotized by these because they work for me, is he calms his mind, which eventually influences the animal and calms the animal's mind,
Mhm.
because he's paid to teach people how to train their animals. Okay. And he says the active mind, the busy mind can't learn. So it's very specific to train animals, but it's also in this cyclone of fear that we've been fire hosed for the last 2 years. After 20 years of a fire hose of fear, terrorism, terrorism. The first thing for ourselves and for our fellow humans is we got to bring it down. We got to notch it down. We got to get to 10% ramped up anxiety so we can hear each other. And so you can say to someone, hey, do you know anyone? Do you know anyone who's ever told you that 9/11 was an inside job? Just because, and that's how delicate we've got to go, I believe. Thoughts and comments, please. I see Ruth again.
Yes, you do. Oh, wow. Well, I want to say that this place that you're talking about that speaks to animals, also, it does speak to a deeper place in every human being. And one of the things that I hear is a lot of people that have been, have a lot of, they want good things to happen. They're liberal. They want, but there's a way that they're always in the intellect and they're always thinking. And I do healing work, and I can tell you that the intellect is very thin. And I really feel like there's something about understanding that people that really want something to happen in the world, that they know is an evolution, an evolutionary way of creating reality, that we almost have to let go of history and begin to understand how we connect our imagination and our minds in a storytelling of an energetic storytelling of a reality, so that some of what goes on in a meeting like this is that we actually vision and actually a place of coherence in our body mind to create the vibrational frequency, which is really what changes reality.
I love every comment you've ever made on these roundtables. What was the word you used? What kind of work do you do, Ruth?
I am I'm an acupuncturist energy healer.
Do you have a website where you provide info for folks?
My conscious body energetics.
So what I want to say about Ruth is a very, very talented healer. She has capabilities that are absolutely quite remarkable. We've experienced it personally. So my hat's off to you, Ruth.
Every sentiment, Ruth, you've expressed in these things radiates that. It really does. So it reminded me of a few books that have helped me along the exact same lines, which is, how to get harmony with each other. I've lost my train of thought. Who's got the next question or comment?
Let's look at.
I want to thank you, Paul. Thank you for your acknowledgement.
Look at the dynamic of the internet. Okay, I mean that's basically what's happening here is the dynamic of the internet. Okay, you had the internet come along. You had a situation where very few people were writing letters to each other. Okay, we were used to the phone call. We were calling people on the phone. Okay, people that are old enough remember that you didn't talk too long on the phone because it cost so much money. Okay, but you can look at the figures, and very few people were writing personal letters to each other. Okay, one thing that the internet engendered was people sitting down at a keyboard and writing to each other. Okay, and that
is writing.
that engenders thought. Okay, and then again with the internet, we don't have to go somewhere and then we can connect right to each other. And again, and then the internet allowed me to be a publisher. Okay, the personal computer and the internet. Without that, I couldn't have been a publisher. Okay, without the internet, we couldn't be doing this. Okay, and this dynamic, okay, of us talking and all of this is creating the future. Okay, and the main thing we need to deal with, okay, is the people from the shadows throwing tons of conspiracy theories out at us, okay, to make us go jump off the cliff one way or the other, instead of staying laser focused on the political acts that we do as people, because the acts that we do as people affect the people around us and then and affect the future. Okay, so you know, why have people been suppressing people's right to vote? Because they want to control things, right? So, you know, what is happening? These people trying to get more people the ability to vote. Okay, I mean, and you know, it's so silly, all the objections that everybody throws up about all this, because it's a very simple act. I mean, we can track, you know, packages and we know exactly where it is and all this stuff, but we don't trust this stuff for people to vote. So, you know, because if we had honest votes, we would have a better world.
Oh, but you know, Kris, I mean, there's no question, but that's part of the problem now, is that the creatures you've been talking about have, you know, taken over, using the technology for the evil. Let's put it that way, instead of for the good.
Yeah, we can use it for the good, and we can
Exactly. No, I agree with you 100%. That is exactly. But right now we do have a problem with the whole war mentality and the fact that we have close to over 700 billion.
And again, the only way that this is going to change is through time, okay, and through political action. It's through political act. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to take over and be a dictator and then stop it all? No, you aren't going to do it. We have to do it through political action, and through votes. And you know, there's, you know, like I talked earlier. You know, I talked to some kids, you know, and they want to, you know, they want to change our government. They want to have an anarchist type thing. And I mean, government is just how people talk to each other.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, a republic is a good form of government. Represent, you know, first off, we should have more people in DC, and you know, there's a big effort to do that. And if we had followed, you know, what they first said, there'd be 6,500 people in DC taking care of our business. Okay, which would be a lot. How are you going to corrupt all those people? Okay. And,
well, I don't know, Kris. I'm not sure that they're not capable of that.
Oh, I am. I have strong faith in America, and I have strong faith in people.
I agree with you, Kris, that it's not about faith. It's about understanding how you've been taken advantage of and getting much smarter about it. There's no question. Once you get smart about it, much harder for people to be taken advantage of.
But no, we know that the truth on the corruption is known. Okay, the corruption is known. It really is. It's really quite known. It's some of it is hidden from us, but the corruption is known. And all we need to do, again, it's political power. Where does it come from? A gun, or does it come from a vote?
Right, but you know what? The money is imbalancing the vote and the political power. The amount of private money.
What's your solution? What are you going to do?
Good.
Okay, I'm actually hoarding. Carol, your hand up.
Well, actually, before Carol, thank you. I want to recognize Jane and ask you to unmute Jane to say your comment as you wish, or say question. Jane, can you hear me? You are muted. You must unmute at your end somehow.
Oh.
I've got it. Hi there, everybody.
Gotcha.
I was just holding up my pen. I think this is our political weapon. This is how we're going to change the world. Because if we're going to rely on our government, well, it hasn't worked, and it's so corrupted that now it looks like they're trying to murder, to depopulate the world. That's what it looks like. And when you see things like the Georgia Guidestones, it's quite scary. I was taught in school, sorry, I'm Scottish and I live in France. And I know Kris Millegan because he spoke with John O'Loughlin, who has a wonderful YouTube station called Macduff Lives. His father was in, he knew JFK. He worked with the FBI, ended up in the Pentagon and was murdered very young with fast acting cancer. So I think they're trying to depopulate hugely the planet at this moment, and that is the real problem.
And Kris,
That's been going on for a long time. That's been going on for a long time. And again, the thing to do is for the people to take political power, and the only way I see that happening is through our republic and through the votes.
I want to recognize Carol. How are you?
Okay, so I was at this rally with Martin Luther King Day, and they were talking about the power of nonviolent struggle and how right now we need to have massive civil disobedience and resist unjust laws because they're criminal laws. I mean, they're actually laws to murder people, and that is where we can put our energy, every one of us personally, every day. I just went to buy groceries today, and I was told, you can't buy groceries unless you put on a mask. We tried to, on our way home, we tried to eat at a restaurant, and they're like, no, you don't have your vaccine passport. You can't eat. These are really basic human rights, and we have to fight for them locally.
But I want to say, wait, Kris, you're going to love this. I submit. Give me a chance to.
We've been having quarantines for a long time. Pandemic happened forever.
Kris,
civil disobedience is a powerful tool.
Right. Disobedience is, but disobedience to what? Disobedience to who?
To unjust laws.
And again, I don't see that accomplishing anything. I do not see it accomplishing.
I'm just saying, like Martin Luther King, he did accomplish something.
Martin Luther King did through, but he's talking about direct nonviolence.
That's what I'm talking about.
On the subject of slavery, on nonviolence.
That's what we're experiencing
towards
now.
a pandemic. It won't work. It won't work.
Kris, how about we have different solutions in our own head, and you have your way of doing it. Carol has hers. We have to come together in terms of sharing as much as we can, but we don't all have to do the same thing.
We're doing that. Just because I'm strident doesn't mean.
Oh, you?
Wait.
And again, I've been watching this for a long time, been watching conspiracy theory for a long time. And I'm telling you, COVID is being used as a control mechanism, but not just, it's silly to me to not deal with public health, to not deal directly with public health.
Well, but again, the corruption, of the pharmaceutical industry controlling Congress.
We have corruption in the pharmaceutical industry. That doesn't mean that everything in medicine is evil and wrong.
You're right, Kris. You're absolutely right. But it turns out that Pfizer is one of the most criminal companies in the world, and it's all on public record after their trials. So we know what they do. They murder people. They do. It's in the court record.
Well, I'd just like to say we've had a lot of commercial experience in this area. We had to do something in order to pay the bills when we were doing our documentaries and traipsing around into various places in the world. And we bought some equipment, so it kind of let's amortize the equipment. So we did some commercial stuff locally, and ran into a lot of computer stuff was going on here, and biotechnology stuff. Boston, Cambridge it's a whole nexus of all kinds of ideas. People come from all over the world to be here and to study and to get involved with these startup companies. And somebody along the way, as I recall, we did some work for a company called Thinking Machines at one point. We did help them do a promotional documentary. This is in the late 80s when people didn't really understand what computers are really all about. And this one guy, Danny Hillis, was there. He was a big computer guy. I know Silicon Valley is known for computers, but this guy was out of MIT, and he made some conference. And the Media Lab at MIT, by the way, is very much involved in the medical aspects of what's going on and the future of the human race. Whether you know it or not, they're taking a lot of, it's kind of freewheeling atmosphere there, unlike very rigid academic study.
Paul,
So,
could I challenge you to a little more succinctly and quickly get to your point?
what I was going to say was that somebody along the way made the statement at one of these MIT places, a very high level guy, that the objective of the medical scientific establishment is to put an IP address on every molecule in the human body. That's the objective.
And that's
What we're experiencing right now.
I want to speak for Kris for 2 seconds to say, with his breadth of knowledge and research and all that he's published and said, that's an option and a possibility that he's well aware of. And we are. I saw Jane. You indicated the desire to comment or make a question. Do you remember what that might have been?
I do. We can go in the middle ground between what Carol and Kris is saying. Here in France, you have a lot of people wearing the masks, even inside their cars when they're all on their own driving, and it's so sad to see. So my compromise, because the thing is, people are frightened, and that's why they're wearing their masks, and it's really confrontational to not wear a mask. So my compromise is to have a plastic shield so that you can still see my face. You can still, obviously air is coming in, but it's a mask and nobody says anything. Everybody just, oh, she's got a mask on. So it's to find that middle ground, and that's the way to push forward and to be nice, to try and be nice about it.
Yeah.
I think that's the way we can get forward.
And in the middle of what Kris, one of the big things that Kris was talking about, he said the corruption's known. And I've been hanging into that thought as I've been listening to everything since. Yeah. So how do we empower ourselves to take action on it? If the corruption is known, but there's just too small a percentage of people doing anything about it, and this is my hobby horse, it's because they feel completely powerless. They would do something if they had the impulse to think that they had an ounce of ability.
Sure.
And my diagnosis of Americans, well articulated in my book called God, School, 9/11 and JFK, The Lies That Are Killing Us and the Truth That Sets Us Free, available at TrineDay.com. Read the amazing reviews at brucedetors.com, is well articulated along these lines.
Mellow voice.
The American experience for 90% of Americans is public school. Public education is the experience for 90% of Americans. And I submit that we don't learn what we're told. We don't learn that we're here, especially young. We learn what we do. What'd you learn in school today? We can stop asking our kids that. They learned to do nothing until they were told to. And then they could only do the 3, 4, 5 options given them by authority. What Americans learn is to do one of the options given to us by authority. Questioning authority is not one of those options.
Well, that's not true. That's not true. You know, I went through the schools. I've been questioning authority. Okay?
Ah, my hippie friend, you are in the spectrum of a rebel.
A lot of people like us, okay? And what I'm saying before, okay, if you know, if you know, we want to go up against them on COVID, they'll shut that down very, very fast, okay? If we need to get in the streets to them about corruption, okay, and about drugs, and about the vote. Okay, but I'm just telling you, they'll go like that. They'll go like that with COVID. Okay, we need to stand up on other things.
Granted, and of the 90% of Americans who go through public school, Kris, there are some at the fringes like you who are a rebel and who went out in the world and started making money and having a record store and doing whatever it took to just, create your own life because you had a sense of your own empowerment, luckily, or because of the way that you were raised. But if the bell curve applies as a model for humanity everywhere and for all time, there's this huge percentage in the middle that just go along and do what everybody does. Now we're going to war, great. Oh, now we're rounding up Jews and putting them in camps. Okay, apathetic from my diagnosis of doing what they're told, and that's our obstacle. And if we could talk to that, which leverages what Ruth and I talked about, calming everyone down to ask, why do I feel the way I feel? Why do I think what I think? Why do you feel powerless? Why aren't you in the street taking on the corruption as Kris Millegan wants you to? This is the core of it. The horse, not the cart. The horse is enough Americans who feel with an ounce of power to do something to take on City Hall about anything.
American Revolution was done with most people sitting on the couch.
Yes. What percent took action? What percent?
15.
Let's get there. We're not there yet. Everything we're talking about is to get that 15% to do something and care and participate. Right?
And
Well,
what can they do? What can they do? They can vote. What
Great.
can
That's at the top. That's the top of the list. We need 100 things on the list and we're out of time.
go?
Wait, we're going to wrap up in a minute. Who's got final? I'm going to say Ruth, Carol, Paul and Liz, and then Kris Millegan. Ruth.
Okay, this is just about education. I feel like I'm well into my 70s and I feel
You look marvelous.
Thank you. I just have liberated myself within the past 2 or 3 years from the education that I received from going through the American educational system, which it fucked me up. And it made me not understand how to be in my own power and how to really articulate and activate myself. It made me look for the right answer out there for the longest time.
Tell us all about it in 30 seconds.
That's it. And the other thing is amazing to me how using a virus as a weapon has snapped people and taken away their capacity to actually see what's going on, because people are terrified of their bodies and they're terrified of viruses and they don't think straight about the weapon that it is.
Thank you, Ruth. Carol, you must unmute.
No, I was just indicating to talk to Ruth because she really wanted to get something out. Go ahead.
No, I have a question for you, Carol. I've learned in this roundtable, you put on one of the first 9/11 conferences. I saw recently on your Facebook activity that do you have a website where you talk about these kind of things?
Oh God, I have so many websites. But
What's the one in 30 seconds you would advertise?
No, I mean, communitycurrency.org is my oldest one. I've been just trying to change the monetary system. That's it.
We have to whisper.
In between everything else.
Okay, no, that's fine. Say it again, communitycurrency.org.
Yeah.
All right,
It's
thank
the
you very
oldest
much.
one.
All right. Liz
Change is
and Paul.
happening.
Oh yeah. Right.
You're getting your turn, sir. You're the grand finale. Hold on a second. Paul and Liz.
10 seconds or less, right? Well,
More or less.
I think you heard it. Okay. Our goal is to, I think, try to offer up a reality, okay, that the magic is in the air. It's there for us. It's real. And that they've been using it all along. They've hoarded it. In fact, you're secret society guys, Kris. And they've conned people into believing there ain't no magic out there for us. There is plenty. All right. And that's why when Paul had that dream on the 8th of January, when he woke up and said to me, I just spent the night with the Grail, was like, it happened.
And I'm not a hippie.
It happened. I mean, it was like, it really happened. We've been working towards this, and the dream the dream was clearly a reflection. In fact, I consider that dream to be the alpha to Alyssa's dream that put Paul on the course. The dream that Paul just had is the omega to those two dreams. And that's a 30-year cycle.
So thank you, everybody, for showing up today. And thank you, Kris, for giving us the platform to do all these things, write these books, and express our perspective and our context to people, because I think the narrative is the way to go. We got to restore some kind of oral history.
Woo.
Kris Millegan, you get the last words.
Final word.
Yeah, you get the final word.
You know, I live in the state of Oregon, okay, and we're the 33rd state, okay, and we happen to have the only river in the United States that flows from the south to the north, kind of like the Nile. And basically at the top of that river, we have Portland. Then below that, we have Salem. And then we have Eugene. I look at them as Portland is Rome, Salem is Jerusalem, and Eugene is Egypt. And we have a place where drama happens. And then also, TrineDay got sued on its second book, Expendable Elite. We were told that we had to declare it to be a fiction. And the people who were trying to make us declare it fiction was the Special Forces Association of the United States.
Oh dear.
And they took us to court in federal district court in Charleston, South Carolina. And the Justice Center there, Hollings Justice Center, is kitty corner from the tavern where the 33rd degree of masonry was started. It was started in Charleston, South Carolina in 1805. And, you know, the CIA played their games there, and they kept saying, oh gosh, well, we're going to have this guy come in, he's going to talk blah, 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 blah. Well, you know, we won a unanimous verdict there in Charleston, South Carolina, with a hippie from Oregon and a lieutenant colonel from New York, okay?
Wow.
And they were expecting to walk right over us. Well, the justice system does work sometimes.
Yep.
And the people saw through the BS and gave us a unanimous verdict. Okay. So yes, the mystical is here, and it's
To help us.
amen. So onwards.
That's our cue, folks. Onwards.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody.